Hello, are you ready to learn for today? From the previous lessons, you learned about solving quadratic equation using extracting square root and factoring. However, there are limitations in using this method, especially if the given equation cannot be transformed the form ax squared is equal to k or the trinomial part is not factorable like these examples. In this video, you will learn another method in solving quadratic equation, which is completing the squares. This will give us an ease on solving those kinds of examples. So our lesson for today is all about solving quadratic equation by completing the squares. But before we start, we're able to remember what's the meaning of a perfect square trinomial? Do you still know how to create or how do we know if the given is a perfect square trinomial? So during your grade 8, we studied about perfect square trinomial, but before that, it's easier for us to understand using an example. So consider this a square of binomial which is x minus 5 quantity squared. If you try to expand this will just be the same as x minus 5 times x minus 5. So using the method FOIL, or first, outer, inner, last, we multiply each of the term. For example, x times x will be x squared, x times negative 5 is negative 5x, negative 5 times x will be negative 5x, and negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. So I'm simplifying this equation on the right side, combining the similar terms, the result will be x squared minus 10x plus 25. And this is what we call the perfect square trinomial. So the perfect square trinomial comes from a binomial square or square of binomial. So let's take another example. So let's consider this x plus 3 quantity squared, another square of binomial. So if you try to expand it, it's the same as saying x plus 3 times x plus 3, which if we try to do FOIL, we'll be having x times x is equal to x squared, x times 3 is equal to 3x, 3 times x is equal to 3x, and 3 times 3 is equal to 9. Adding the similar terms on the resulting equation, we'll be having the equation x squared plus 6x plus 9. And once again, this is a perfect square trinomial. So one idea that you need to remember for this lesson is that this perfect square trinomial is just the result of a square of binomial. Okay, so in completing the square, all we need to do is to have this perfect square trinomial be in the form of a square of binomial. So in this case, we'll be having the form x squared plus bx or x squared minus bx, which will be having a missing third term, and all we need to do is to transform this into a perfect square trinomial using this formula. So, what do we mean by that b? That b is the one on the middle, yung katabi ni x or yung variable x natin. So, all we need to do is to follow this formula just to complete this form and make it a perfect square trinomial. So, what do we need to do? For example, this is the given. We have x squared plus 6x plus blank. 1 is missing, so all we need to do is to use that formula, make that formula below, and transform or substitute 6 because the value of our b is 6. So it's the same as saying 6 divided by 2 quantity squared. And 6 divided by 2 is simply as 3. So all we need to do is to square 3, we'll be having the value equal to 9. So that 9 will now be the third term of the equation. So we'll be having the perfect square trinomial be equal to x squared plus 6x plus 9. So the square of binomial, which is equivalent to this perfect square trinomial, can be identified by getting the square root of x squared, which is x, and the square root of 9, which is 3. Combining those two given expression, will be having the square of binomial be equal to x plus 3 quantity squared. Do you understand? If not, don't worry, we still have these following examples. So let's try this number. So yan, for example, you have x squared plus 24x plus blank. So I already placed the formula so that you'll be having an idea. So once again, let's place that formula there. Yan, so if you ever think of 144, because we have 24 divided by 2, that's the value of our b, we get 12. Getting the square of it will be equal to 144. And that will be the third term of the given perfect square trinomial. So get the square root of x squared and get the square root of 144. We'll be having the square of binomial will be equal to x plus 12 quantity squared. So let's try another example. So it's your turn now. You can pause the video if you want to answer this one. So I have here p squared plus 16p plus blank. Sige, I'll give you 2 seconds to pause the video and answer. 2, 1. Okay, so what do you think is the answer? Is your answer be equal to 64? That's right. So getting the 16 divided by 2 is 18 and square is 8. Sorry, and squaring that number is 64. So the third term of our perfect square trinomial is 64. And if you also get or got the square of binomial of this perfect square trinomial be equal to p plus 8 quantity squared, your answer is also correct. Okay, let's try another example. So let's consider b squared minus 15b plus blank. And let's have this formula already so that you can answer or you can use already that formula. 2 seconds to pause the video. 2, 1. So let's see. What do you think will be the answer? And so considering negative 15 as the value of your b or the one beside your linear o diba? Linear term. So negative 15 over 2, since we cannot divide that to 2, we consider it as a whole fraction being squared. So we get square of negative 15 is 225 and the square of 2 is 4. So we just square the numerator and the denominator. So if you got 225 over 4, then your answer is correct. Now, so if you also got this square of binomial, which will be equal to b minus 15 over 2, quantity squared, because you got the square root of b squared will be equal to b, and the square root of 225 over 4 will be equal to 15 over 2. And then your answer is correct. Right now, we are ready to learn how to solve quadratic equation using completing the square. So let's proceed. Solving quadratic equation using completing the square. So we can complete the square to solve a quadratic equation, but it's supposed to be in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So bago tayo mag-start, kailangan i-transform muna natin siya in this standard form. So here are the following steps. Yan, we only need 4 steps to use this method. So first, place the constant term on the right side of the equation. All the terms with the known are on the left side. Second, check if the numerical coefficient of x squared is 1. If not, divide each term of the equation with the numerical coefficient of x squared. Third, complete the square of the left side of the equation by making perfect square trinomial into a square binomial. And fourth, solve the resulting equation using extracting square root. So we will better understand this following step as we go on the examples. So let's proceed. Okay, let's consider this example number 1. So we have a given x squared minus 8x plus 12. So yung first step, ang sabi niya, we have to transfer the constant term on the right side of the equation. So having that, if it is plus 12, you have to transfer it on the right side. So you have to make it negative 12. So this is what will happen. Diba? From positive 12, since it will be on the right side of the equation, it will become negative 12. So the second step says that we have to check the given coefficient of x squared, because if it is equal to 1, then we'll proceed on the third step. If not, we have to divide each term by the given coefficient. Since it's equal to 1, therefore, we can proceed to the third step already. So the third step says that we have to make this one a perfect square trinomial. So how do we make this one, or this left side of the equation, a perfect square trinomial? So we will once again use what we recalled a while ago. So we'll use the formula b over 2 quantity squared to make this one a perfect square trinomial. But since this is an equation, kailangan both sides will be having plus b over 2 quantity squared, because same rule. Whatever you do on the left side of the equation, you will also do it on the right side of the equation. Okay, let's try to make this one a perfect square trinomial. So let's consider once again the formula b over 2 quantity squared. So since b will be equal to negative 8, we bring down that negative 8 and substitute it to the value of b. So we have negative 8 divided by 2 quantity squared. Negative 8 divided by 2 is 4. If you square that 4, the answer is 16. So all we need to do is to substitute or replace that given equation into plus 16 for both sides. Yan. So pinalitan lang natin siya. So this will now be a perfect square trinomial. And this one can be simplified as well. So from that, we have the perfect square trinomial be transformed into a square of binomial, which will be equal to x minus 4 quantity squared. So if you don't understand this part, please kindly go back on the first part of the video wherein we have the recall in transforming your perfect square trinomial into a square of binomial. And then simplifying negative 12 plus 16 will be equal to positive 4. Yan. So since we already have this equation or this given square of binomial and positive 4, as you notice, this looks like an example that once we have on the given extracting square root, because the fourth step says that we just need to solve this given equation by extracting square root. So how do we do it once again? So we get the square root of both sides. So if we get the square root of both sides, we will get x minus 4. And then the square root of 4 will be positive and negative 2. Sana naalala nyo pa. Next, since this one is positive and negative 2, we'll be having two values of 2. One is positive 2 and another is negative 2. So we'll divide this given equation into x minus 4 is equal to 2 and the x minus 4 is equal to negative 2. So if we transpose negative 4 in the right side of the equation, using addition property of equality, we can add 4 plus 2, which is equal to 6. And doing the same thing on the right side equation, we have negative 4 be transferred on the right side of the equation. So from negative, it becomes positive. But right now, it's 4 minus 2. So this now will become x is equal to 2. So the solutions are 2 and 6. Nagets ba? Okay, let's try another example. So let's consider this example number 2. X squared plus 6x minus 41 is equal to 0. So let's once again do the first step. So step number 1, we have to transfer this negative 41 on the right side of the equation. So we will be having instead of negative 41, we'll be having positive 41. Yan, di ba? Lilipat natin sa right side, so magiging positive siya. Then step number 2, we'll check if the given coefficient of x squared is 1. And if not, we have to divide each of the given term into that given coefficient. Since our coefficient is just 1, then we'll proceed on the third step already. So right now, all we need to do is to make this one a perfect square trinomial by having this formula. So once again, we'll use b over 2 quantity squared. So we'll add it for both sides of the equation. Diba? Since this one is an equation, right and left side should have the same value. So next, we'll use once again b over 2 quantity squared. Since our b is positive 6, just substitute it. We have 6 over 2 squared. Then 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So we add both sides with 9. Just replace that given equation since we're already solved the value which is 9. So plus 9 sila parehas. So our x squared plus 6x plus 9 will now be a perfect square trinomial. And later on, we can simplify also 41 plus 9. So what's the fourth step or the third step? Yeah, actually, this one is still on the third step. After you create this one into a perfect square trinomial, you have to transform it into a binomial square or square of binomial. So if you already know or mastered our recall lesson, so we know that the square of binomial, which is equivalent to this given equation, will be equal to x plus 3 quantity squared. And adding 41 plus 9 will be equal to 50. So yeah, so once again, we'll just need to follow the last step, which is using the square root property to solve for this given equation or resulting equation. So how do we do that? That's the fourth step. Square root both sides. So getting the square root of both sides will give us, but wait, we have this 50. So there will be a factor of 50 that is a perfect square, which is 25 and 2. So if you don't know what's happening on this part, kindly watch the other video for us to understand how to simplify radicals. And you just need to watch it first before you continue with this one. So that we'll know how to get these factors and why do we have this 25 times 2. So if you already watched this one, you will understand that 50 can be broken down into two given factors. So we have 25 times 2. Since 25 is a perfect square, we can simplify this one. Yan. So simplifying square root of x plus 3 quantity squared is x plus 3. And getting the square root of 25 times 2 is 5 square root of 2. Why? Because if we get the square root of 25, the answer is 5. And since 22 cannot be a perfect square or is not a perfect square, it will just stay inside the radical sign. So it's just square root of 2. So our resulting equation will now be x plus 3 is equal to positive negative 5 square root of 2. In this case, all we need to do is to try to divide this 1 into 2 and make it simplified. So 1 is having the positive square root of the positive 5 square root of 2 and the other is the negative 5 square root of 2. So yan. Then the same thing as what we did on the previous example, we can transpose 3 on the right side of the equation. So we'll be having negative 3 plus 5 squared root of 2. Yan. So the same thing as subtraction property of equality. So minus 3 for both sides, magiging negative 3 dun sa right side. So that's the first equation. On the other hand, we also have this negative 3 because subtraction property of equality, minus 3 for both sides. So ito yon. Kaya siya nagiging ganyan, minus 3 minus 3. So this one, minus 3, minus 3. Yan. Kaya siya naging negative 3 minus 5 square root of 2. So as you notice, the two equation looks the same. The only difference is here, this one will be plus and this one will be minus. So we can combine them as one, just like what we have it here. So our given solution will now be negative 3 plus minus 5 square root of 2. I hope I'm not covering the answer. So, yan. Yan yung magiging sagot natin. So, pinag-combine lang natin because plus minus lang din naman sila. So, this is another case of completing the square. And as you notice, the answer is not a whole number. That means this cannot be factorable, unlike the first example. And obviously, it's not easy for us to solve this coming from this equation using the square root property. Yan. So we have to use completing the square. Okay, let's proceed to the last example. Yan. Example number 3. Consider 4m squared plus 28m minus 51. So here, nakita nyo, hindi lang palaging x yung variable natin. It could be any variable or any letter from the alphabet. So here, first step ulit, check nitong constant term natin. We have to transfer it on the right side of the equation. Since it's negative 51, kabaliktaran niya, it's positive. So from negative 51, it will now become positive 51. But this time, nasa right side na siya ng equation natin. Second step, we check the coefficient of the first term or the quadratic term. So this time, ang katabi ni m squared ay 4. O, ayan na, magkakaroon na tayo ng second step. Kasi 4 na siya, di ba? If it is not equal to 1, sabi dun sa second step, you have to divide all of the given term to the given coefficient o yung binigay na katabi nung ating first term. So, you have to divide each of them by 4. So, 4 divided by 4 will be equal to 1. 28 divided by 4 will be equal to 7. And 51, I think it's not a whole number if you divide it to 4. So, let's see. Yan. Kaya siya naging m squared na lang kasi 1 na yan. Then this one will become 7. And since we cannot divide it and we cannot get a whole number from it, we'll just consider this one as a fraction. So, yan. That's the end of the second step. So we proceed on the third step wherein we just make this left side of the equation into a perfect square trinomial. So ano ulit yung gagamitin natin? Same step or same formula. So we add both sides the equation or the given formula b over 2 quantity squared. Since this one, this time we have 7 as our b, so we'll do this formula. So as you notice, we have b over 2. Yan, so baba ulit natin yung 7. So 7 over 2. Since we cannot divide 7 to 2 and get a whole number answer, all we need to do is to square the numerator and also square the denominator. So ganito mangyayari. 7 squared is equal to 49 and 2 squared is equal to 4. And this time, ay na yung magiging value ng c natin. That's why you will see here, we add both sides by 49. Yan. So, mas maganda rin kasi similar yung fraction natin dito. It's easier for us to add. So, once again, we have this m squared plus 7m plus 49 as our perfect square trinomial. Now, for the end of the third step of this completing the square, all we need to do is to transform this one. Oh, ayan. Inad na. 51 plus 4, ay 51 plus 49 is equal to 100. So, we can also once again simplify this one as 100 over 4. Ayan pala. Mas madali na siyang i-add, di ba? And just to end this step, or the third step, we have to transform this perfect square trinomial into square of binomial, which will give us, yan, yan, di ba? 7 over 2 quantity squared. So, that's the square root of 49, kaya sa 7 over 2. Yan. So, is equal to 100 over 4. So, I hope na-gets nyo kanina kung bakit ito naging 100 over 4. So, that's the square of binomial. Right now, we are ready to use the square root property or the fourth step just for us to solve this using completing the square. So, the fourth step says that we have to get the square root of both sides. So, I think 100 over 4 is a perfect square as well. So, we get the square root of both sides. Then, we have m plus 7 over 2. That's the square root of this given square binomial is equal to positive and negative 10 over 2. So, napansin nyo. Diba? Square root ni 110, square root ni 4 ay 2. Yan. So, we don't need to simplify any radicals naman. So, we divide these two equations because one is positive, one is negative. We have to consider m plus 7 over 2 is equal to 10 over 2. That's the positive side of this resulting equation. Ito naman yung negative. So, since may negative dito, we'll have another equation will be equal to m plus 7 over 2 is equal to negative 10 over 2. So, we just need to solve each of these equations. So, on the first part, we'll be having, okay yan, we subtract 7 over 2 for both sides or transpose natin yan, magiging negative 7 over 2. Yan. So, 10 minus 7 is equal to 3. So, one of the answer will be equal to 3 over 2. Yan. So, kapag fraction, since pares naman ang denominator, yung nasa taas lang isusubtract natin. Next. So, we have here another one. So, lipat ulit natin yung 7 dito sa right side. Magiging minus 7 over 2. Negative 10 minus 7 will be equal to negative 17. So, this now will be equal to negative 17 over 2. Yan. Sige, alis tayo dyan. Yan. So, that will be negative 17 over 2. So, the solutions will be these two values, 3 over 2 and negative 17 over 2. So, I hope you understand this following example. Now, it's time for you to try this following examples para ma-practice nyo kung paano nga siya sinasagutan. So, solve the following equations. For x, write your solution and answer on your notes. So, you have to use, I think, completing the square to solve this following equation. So, we have here this one, ito, tsaka ito. So, I'll count 5 seconds for you to pause the video. And after that, I will show you the solutions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, I hope na-solve nyo na yung tatlong examples na to. So, right now, I will just show you the following solution. So, for number 1, we have this solution. You can pause the video for 3 seconds. Yan. To take a look. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's proceed to number 2. That will be the solution and answer. So, 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So, I hope you screenshot or you pause the video just to understand if you'll be having the same answer or the same solution. Next, let's proceed to number 3. Yan. 3 seconds to pause the video. 3, 2, 1. So I hope you got these 3 answers correct. So I hope you understand the lesson for today. Until next time, bye!